Well, hi, Golnar. Thank you so much for coming today. It's so nice to see you. And today I would like to talk to you about the Woman Life Freedom protests that are happening and have been happening for more than 3 months now in Iran and globally, and talk a little bit about your research. But would you like to start by telling a little bit about yourself and your work?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me and your invitation. I really appreciate that. I'm Golnar Gishnizjani and I'm PhD student at the University of Turku, Department of Media Studies. My project is about Iranian women digital activism. It covers Iranian inside and in the diaspora. It focuses on how Iranian women are using social media to echo their voice and use different features and affordances of place to speak about some invisible issues. Yeah.
Mm. Well, on social media, we definitely have seen the hashtag Woman Life Freedom very frequently during this fall. So would you just like to give us a little bit of a background and context why these demonstrations started?
Mm-hmm. Um, Maybe many people have heard about this story, but briefly speaking, it has started September 16, 2022, when Mahsa Amini, has been murdered at the hand of so-called morality police because of improper hijab. After that, the demonstration has ignited all around the country and many people has joined. But Gina was a Kurdish girl, and the demonstration has started after her funeral. The place we have heard the slogan Woman Life Freedom, Zan Zendegi Azadi, or Jen Jian Azadi, the Kurdish one, for the first time. So the place and her ethnicity really matters in this time of revolutionary uprising, and we should notice that part.
Well, for those people who don't know, could you briefly tell what is the morality police?
Yes, after the revolution, Islamic Revolution, 1979, the regime has a rule about hijab, and we have compulsory hijab in Iran. After years, then they put a station called morality police in public spaces and on the street to kind of control women's way of dressing and clothing. So they had this right and power to arrest women and to guide them. It wasn't the first time that a woman has been killed in the morality police. We had kind of the same story years ago, but it didn't get that much attention, I think. But for many years, Iranian women have been traumatized by morality police on the street for different reasons.
Yeah, definitely it seems that after the death of Mahsa Amini, that there is a very wide demand for change. And could you tell a little bit more about the background and history? That obviously the demand to change did not start only with one person, even though her story is very central.
Yeah.
But what is the background that we now see is kind of almost like exploding in the streets and social media?
Yes. The current uprising has rooted in a long history of activism in Iran. For the first time, I'm talking now about hijab. A woman whose name was Tahira Qurratulain, she took off her niqab, kind of hijab that covers face and hair, in 84, and it was started at that time. But then over the years, Iranian women haven't stopped resistance against compulsory hijab. After the revolution, they had 5 days of demonstration on the street against compulsory hijab. But at that time, men didn't participate in the demonstration. They were kind of alone. Then after that, and over the decades of Islamic Republic, they did so much effort to defy these tools and symbol of oppression in different ways, in digital spaces and as well as on the street. We have some campaigns on the social media like White Wednesday or My SDLC Freedom. But the point which is really important and somehow invisible is everyday activism of Iranian women to resist this oppression. And if we are seeing at this time young women are really courageous and they are in front of this uprising because they have this legacy of activism. And they are so angry because since last year, after the last election, presidential election in Iran, this new so-called president, who is really conservative, is focused on morality police on the street and puts more restrictions on women's body. Just 2 months before Gina's death, at the hands of the regime, we had these conflicts and discussion between a woman whose name was Sepide Rashno and then a hijabi woman in the bus that lead to arrest Sepide Rashno, and she had to make confession on the state media and apologize to Chadori women. So after that, we have also seen many footages on the street that morality police behave brutally with women and arrest them for just having improper hijab. We had seen all the stuff and people inside of the country witnessing, experiencing this restriction. The death of Gina just was kind of, explosion, this accumulated anger over the years, and for 2 months from the events and incident with Sepide Rashno and then the brutality of morality police on the streets.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the hijab, because even though I understand that the protests are of something much more than only about the hijab, but they are still also about the hijab, right? So what does the hijab signify for Iranian women?
That's a good question, and I think it's when we are saying this revolutionary uprising is about hijab, it means what does hijab do and what is represent. Hijab was always the identity mark for the Islamic Republic. After the revolution, they have said we want Iranian women wear this chador, the black long garment, to show the world something has changed. So women's bodies was the place of kind of framing the ideology of Islamic Republic. And women have been experiencing this oppression for years and years. It's not about only controlling the way of dressing and clothing. It's about controlling the way of your body movement in the public spaces and how you can act in the public spaces. So in this matter, hijab is really important for the Islamic Republic, because if they just turn back from this rule, compulsory hijab, they are just kind of ruining, or I don't know how to say, just go against their own ideology about the Islamic Republic. And we should understand that when Iranian women are talking about hijab, they are talking about the way they feel oppression under their skin from the age of 7 when they go to school. And if they don't wear hijab, they are not allowed to go to school. At age 9, wearing hijab is becoming legitimized by the state when we have this Jashn Taklif or duty party that they have to wear hijab after that in public spaces everywhere. It's talking about how they take this, feeling of oppression, anger for years and years. And it is important to see how the regime used hijab for controlling women's body generally.
That's really interesting. But when you mention public spaces, so isn't also like the gender segregation of public spaces another similar mode of control?
Yes, it's a good point, because when we are talking about gender segregation, it's also related to, how women are allowed to behave on the street. It's important to see the role of Iranian women in this current uprising, particularly on the street, because a street was not belonging to Iranian women. They have been always told that street is not the place for acting. They have been always in control, not only by hijab, but also by other tools of controlling. They were not allowed to dance on the street, to sing, and to go to some particular spaces. But now this time we are seeing Iranian women are on the street and front line of the uprising. It's impressive because they are demanding their rights in the place that were not belong to them, and it was a kind of restricted presence on the public spaces. But this time they behaved bravely, and they took their hijab, they burn it, they wave their headscarves, they are dancing on the street, they are reclaiming all the rights have been taken of them, and that's beautiful.
But where does this young generation of women find the courage to do so? That they can lead this whole social movement and take the central stage?
Yes, I hope that we could have heard their voice, and I think it's necessary to hear how do they find this courage, because I'm also witnessing their behaviors from outside, and it's my understanding. They might analyze their behavior differently, but as we mentioned in the beginning, I think they take this courage from the legacy that they have from their moms and past generations. It's not something that happened spontaneously. On the other side, this young generation have been connected to the world more than the previous generations, and they have used, for example, digital space, social media, to share their lives and to share how do they behave. We have seen many young girls are dancing, singing, and celebrating their lives in social media, and it has been kind of forbidden for previous generation like me. This time they wanted to share, to have it, publicly as well. They want to ruin this distinct border between digital life and then material life. They want to have the same thing in the material life as well. So the courage is because of their own characteristic and the legacy as well, and the opportunities, the tools they have that previous generations didn't.
Well, you mentioned sharing stories on social media and sharing different parts of your life, and I think some acts that we have now seen a lot in the digital space are women publicly taking off their hijab, and also women cutting their hair, and also in the demonstrations for supporting the woman life freedom movement that I participated in Helsinki. There were women and men cutting their hair. And I would like to understand more of the background of this act.
Mm-hmm.
What does the hair cutting symbolize and mean?
Mm-hmm. Hair cutting is an old ritual among some ethnic groups in Iran, Kurdish people and Lor people. They women usually cut their hairs at the time of grieving. But metaphorically, hair cutting for Iranians means also rebirth. So there are two sides. From one side, we deeply grieve for something that we have lost. From the other side, it's a time of that we are hoping for the new life. And it's interesting because Gina was a Kurdish girl, and the slogan was also Kurdish. Hair cutting also stemmed from Kurdish culture. So everything is kind of connected. And then this act kind of got attentions of others from different backgrounds in different countries. We have seen powerful symbolic solidarity, maybe because of social media and activities of Iranian diaspora. We have done the same stuff in different places, and then other people from other backgrounds stand with us in hair cutting, which is beautiful and powerful. But personally, I think besides doing something symbolic, we need also to understand and acknowledge the meaning of pain, suffer, and the actions. It's not only doing and cutting hair. Suffer of people should be seen and should be legitimated in just hair cutting and sharing with others, which is beautiful. And I appreciate all the effort of people. But the culture and the meaning behind of that also should be noticed. Otherwise, it could be just, a single act to get attentions of others somehow.
Thank you. Yeah, that is really interesting. But it makes me think that could these aspects as the grief or mourning and the hope and something like the wish for something new to grow also be something that in a certain way expresses what the demonstrations also are about?
Yeah, I think so, because the demonstration is about grieving and also demanding and picturing a new life, which is really important in this time of uprising. The acts of people help us and give us this hope that the new future, different future may happen. We didn't have this imagination. And I call the whole stuff, revolution, because people are naming this uprising revolution, and they are becoming more revolutionary, which is more important than the revolution as a time, because it's a process, and during this process people are learning how to become revolutionary. And one of the aspects of being revolutionary is picturing different future and developing the imagination for different future, which is something that I'm learning from people inside the country, particularly young generations. And I think it's something, it's a message for the rest of the world as well, that if we are fighting for something, there is hope and we can imagine a different future, which is important.
And definitely it would seem to me, at least, that people are actually really doing and creating it. For example, I'm thinking about the university students who go against the gender segregated spaces. What would you like to say about that?
Yes, of course, because if we just look at acts of students at the universities, it's really impressive. They are breaking the walls that the Islamic Republic have been built between people at the universities. One of the place, which was the place of ruling this gender segregation was restaurants. But at this time, students are just saying, no, we don't want this anymore. We want to eat together. And they did it and chant woman life freedom. After a while, the campus has been closed, but they haven't stopped, and they went out. They sat on the street and eat together, and again chant woman life freedom, because this slogan somehow put everything together. It's not only about women's rights, it's about human rights, and students are demanding for human rights. They see it in a way that, okay, if you put this wall between us, this time we are able to ruin this, and we know how to behave, we know what do we want. And it's different from the past uprising and movement we had at the universities as well, because we were kind of conservative, even though we want freedom as well. But the way we show and express our demands were really different from this generation. They have kind of no fear, or they may have fear, but they realize fighting for something important is more impressive rather than thinking about fears. They may learn how to overcome their fears, because obviously fears are over there when they are seeing their peers have been killed, have been imprisoned, have been imprisoned. So it's dangerous and this is scary, and they are human beings. So, and you know, they haven't experienced revolution before. They have been on TikTok, social media. They have kind of sort of normal life until 3 months ago, and suddenly they are in a situation that they have to behave revolutionary, and they are learning from each other, and it's kind of test and error sometimes, but the important thing is they behave within the group and with others. They don't behave individually. They see themselves as one person among others. And it's a lesson for us as well, I think.
Well, I would think it's really remarkable, and I think this has been pointed out several times over different medias, that the revolutionary movement and protest start with the demand for women's rights.
Yeah.
But then it expands to cover ground of much wider expressions of dismay and frustration, and much wider demands for change.
Yes, of course. I think because these people could relate to the slogan and relate to the life of Gina as well. Gina was an ordinary woman from Kurdish area, but her death could connect people from different places in Iran. So the slogan is collective, inclusive, and diverse. People of Iran are kind of united, but it doesn't mean that they are the same. The demand is the same, but the beautiful part of this uprising is being inclusive and being connected to different ethnic groups and LGBTQI. There are still a lot to do, and it doesn't mean that all people have the same point of view, but at least to date it's something more diverse, and many people are still joining. For example, we are talking about young generation from the beginning of our talk, which is important, and they are in the focal point of the uprising. But understanding the current uprising as just generational is somehow wrong, to my opinion, because after 3 months, other generations are also joined to the young ones, and they are protesting together. We have seen many people have lost their children, so, or their children are in prison, or they lost their jobs. They are suffering. The suffer is there, and they are joining right now. They also echo their voice. They behave courageously. The good example of that is Kurdish women. When they are grieving for their children, they do it together, and they are not that much young, but they are grieving for younger generations, and grieving is a form of resistance. So grieving is not just, expressing our mourn or sadness. It's something more than mourning. It's a site of demanding justice and doing it collectively, not individually. Yeah.
I would also think it is remarkable how the collective movement and people coming together can also create something extremely powerful. Like just as an example, the Financial Times just listed the Iranian women collectively, entitling them the freedom fighters, among their list of the 25 most influential women of year 2022. And I thought it was remarkable that instead of picking one woman or giving one person's name to the whole movement, that they give this title to Iranian women as a collective. And somehow I would like to think about it as a sign of the power that an individual can have, even without necessarily being a person in power. But what would you think about this collective aspect of people coming together and the power?
Yes, it's a side that sparks my attention as well, because at least here in Finland, the place that I live, people usually behave individually. But then when I look at my people inside the country, I learned something, and I understood, okay, each person could stand with others for something more important, because we see each other, in the place of the others. I could have been Gina, my sister could have been Gina. So we are in the same place at terms of experiencing suffer and pain. But more than it, we are in the same place for demanding our rights and resistance. It's a big lesson from people inside the country that we don't need to be really influential or famous figure. Ordinary people could be influential as well if they act together and if they stand with each other. To me, this collective action or being more diverse and inclusive exemplify in Baluchi women activities and the way of protest, resistance, because they were one of the most invisible group in Iran. The rest of the country hasn't, that much attention. We didn't pay that much attention to their lives and their demands, their oppressions. But this time, it's kind of the first time that we are talking about their lives and their suffer, because they are active. It's not because, the rest of the country are just talking for them. They are actively participating in protests, and they are demanding their rights. But others take the place to echo their voice. And it's beautiful because, for example, we see Baluchi women are protest on the street, or they just write graffiti, woman life freedom. They may not access social media, but when someone just take a photo and share it, and then others reshare the photo, it kind of amplifies the voice of Baluchi women as well, even though they may not have the same privileges or skills to use digital spaces, but digital space could be a place for others to circulate the voice of others. And it's the first time that we are doing this, I think.
Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I think it's fascinating to think of the digital space and social media as having this almost like radical potential for social change, because so often we tend to think of social media as something like a superficial escape from reality kind of a thing, but now you are talking about some very radical potential. So would you like to elaborate a bit more on that?
I think this time, of course, I would like to talk about it because social media help people inside the country and outside to be connected. It's the first role of social media. Without the digital space, we haven't been connected and informed about the stuff inside the country, and also for Iranians, because there are many contents about how to resist on the street, how to stay safe, and how to take care of yourself during the protest on the street. So it is informative and it raises awareness about the situation. But it also, help us to share and reshare stuff outside the country with people inside the country, to keep the voices, high, kind of, because they are witnessing their voices have been heard somewhere else and people are not silent anymore. In this aspect, social media play a really important role, but social media couldn't exist without people actions on the street. It's kind of constant interplay between digital space and then material space, both sides. And it doesn't mean that every single people in Iran are in the same situation to use social media. We should understand this kind of inequality of using social media, because some places are not accessed or they don't have the skill to use the features and the space. But this time at least others are voicing them, and in this term social media was really important. Using hashtags and having activities on Twitter, talking about issues. I think social media help people to be revolutionary, and it's a place of kind of learning how to act revolutionary, because it's gonna be a process, and we are in the process of doing something. Over the process, we need a space to talk and to teach each other how to behave. Social media is the place that we have in common, and also to share our voices with others. It's something that ignites the protest as well. But it doesn't mean that the social media or digital space was completely clean or without any threat. Misinformation is there, content moderation, everything has happened and is still happening. But for people inside the country, the digital space is an important place to do the revolution, I think.
But perhaps also to express some ideas that can have wider influence also outside the country.
Yeah.
Or what do you think? What could be the message that this social movement can give to people globally?
Yes, of course, they can send their voice. I don't know about the message, but I think the whole uprising is kind of about the global struggles. And if we pay attention and look at Iranian people, they are asking for their it seems they are asking for their basic rights, but it's not also basic rights, because they are asking for taking their bodily autonomy back, and they are asking for having a livable life. They are asking for their dignity. these concepts are global and they are the core of life maybe everywhere. If we don't put concrete border between the Western world and the rest of the world, they may find their own struggles. We are seeing that people, particularly Afghan women, Iraqi women in Syria, in Turkey, in Chile, women are chanting woman life freedom, and they have some statement, solidarity statement. Currently in China, in the protest, Chinese just wrote woman life freedom and they chant woman life freedom. I think it shows how this slogan could be connected to others, and people can find their own struggle between these simple but meaningful three words.
Well, since we both work inside of the academia, I would like to wrap up the conversation by talking a little bit about this, discussing these issues within the academia.
Mm-hmm.
So particularly in the United States, coming from Patricia Hill Collins and the Black feminist studies, there has been a demand on intellectual activism, meaning that we as researchers, as so-called intellectuals, should also be conscious of how we use our voice, who we are talking to, and what we want to do with our voice. And also, I had the privilege to attend one of your seminars that you organized at the University of Turku earlier this fall, where you addressed the demand for academic solidarity. So finally, I would like to hear your thoughts on what we as researchers inside academia could do, or what is our responsibility or our possibilities, and why is solidarity important?
I think solidarity matters because, first of all, Iranian people, and not only Iranian people, people in areas like Iran, in China, or other places, in Afghanistan, they are asking for solidarity. They want others to see their struggles and to stand with them, because they are kind of aware it's not possible to get the point that they want individually. They act among the group and they behave, their practices are collective, but they are also asking us to be collected with each other, and academia is the place of practicing that. To my understanding, working in academia is just really individualistic. But if we start practicing solidarity inside the academia, we may also learn how to behave among the group and how to make the community. Because right now there are many people in academia from Iran, from China, from Iraq, and other places. They have so much struggles. But when others in more privileged situation and position are silent and they don't want to talk, they feel that they are outside. They are kind of outsided, and their life is kind of distanced from the real thing that they are experiencing in academia. It may be needed that sometimes we stop doing kind of research based on the theory and concept that we had and we learn, which are really necessary to understand the patterns. But sometimes we can just look at outside to public. We may learn something, and it's also the process of knowledge production. And the matter of proximity, I understand that for some people the struggles in Iran or in somewhere else are not really important because they don't feel any or they don't see any connections. But talking about those struggles display how connected we are, and how our demands, our rights are kind of the same. We are fighting for the same thing in different places, even though we have different lived experiences. and the intensity of experiences might be also different, but the core of demand is the same. And without solidarity, I mean actual solidarity, not only symbolic solidarity or only writing about solidarity, then we can find those similarities, and then we may produce something more meaningful for others and get attentions of others, toward academic works.
Would you finally like to say just what could be a little sign of solidarity that somebody could do, or how could one express solidarity if they wanted to show their support?
I think it depends on the position, but in academia, like the thing that you have done, provide a situation, provide a place and a space for others to speak and to discuss, and asking people, what do you want right now? Because sometimes I think there is this notion that in feminism we shouldn't talk for others, and we should just provide a space for others to speak and this stuff. But it sometimes uses, as an excuse, because we can ask each other, what do you want right now? What can we do? And if we discuss such issues more, we may also provide a space for some academic works together and amplify the voices of others. If we have a, course or class, we can briefly mention about the situation. Or if we have Iranian students in the class, we can ask them, do you want to speak? Is there something that you want to talk? Can it do something for you? They may seem small actions, but they are powerful. And it makes this feeling of being heard for others, because then after a while those people can also ask others, do you want to do something? And if we start just practicing and just asking, we may find some practical ways of solidarity in academia. Instead of just doing our own work, we can be more inclusive.
Well, thank you so much. For me, that at least is very inspirational, and many things you have said today about how small things can have a big meaning, and I think this is a very powerful message.
Yes, I think that there is a point that we can learn from people or Iranian women. As I said, they have been practicing this activism over the decades, everyday activism. It could be kind of the same in academia. It's not necessary, to have always this big intellectual stuff. It may start from small things and then end to more influential things. But for practicing solidarity, we can look at people who are doing this and learn something from them. Iranian women, Kurdish women, Afghan women are the good examples of that, I think.
Well, thank you, Golnar. I have definitely learned a lot from you today, and you have given me a lot of inspiration. So I thank you very much for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
And let's continue this conversation in the future.
Course. Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.